All right, JD. JD, where are you from originally? Where'd you grow up?
Santa Rosa, California.
Up by Napa?
Yeah.
Tell me about your family growing up.
My family's amazing. I got the best type of parents that you could possibly ask for.
How's that?
So they were just present. They were there. Like as soon as they had me and my sister, their lives became about us. They also had some rough backgrounds. My dad was a heavy combat Marine veteran from Vietnam. So he came back with a lot of PTSD. He came back with a lot of trauma issues. My mom came from a very abusive household in Flint, Michigan. She was one of 11 kids and grew up in extreme poverty and with extreme abuse. And they really fashioned their lives as much as they possibly could to build a family and be parents. But when they both hitchhiked from the East Coast, my dad from Long Island, my mom from Flint, out to California where they met, they got saved. They found Jesus, and they were in this like hippie commune, Christian hippie commune. And so I grew up in a very staunchly religious type of environment, but my parents were the best.
What kind of kid were you in high school?
In high school, so like when I was 6 years old, I ended up getting molested. And like up until then, I was on a pretty halfway decent path. But after that happened, I started just wilding out. Like I didn't know how to process what had happened to me. Growing up in a really staunchly religious household, especially back in the 80s with where Christianity was at then, if you were gay, you were going to hell. And so I assumed that what this grown man did to me as a child meant that I was going to fucking hell. And I also had all these questions about whether or not that made me gay. So I never talked about it. I didn't let any of it out. And what I've learned in my adult life is that unprocessed trauma just festers until we learn to address those things and get them out. But how does a child really process that type of shit? It comes out in really shitty negative behaviors. And that was me.
Did your parents know about it?
My parents didn't know anything about it. I didn't speak a word about it until I was in my mid to late 20s. I was actually in rehab at that point. But what they saw was me having these negative behaviors.
You were holding on to that secret all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. And that just came out in me acting terribly. So they took me to a doctor, and what they were doing in the 80s, if your kid couldn't act right, was they were giving you amphetamines. They called it ADHD, which I do believe that I have ADHD, but they put me on a cycle of different amphetamines. So I ended up getting off those in high school. I hated the way they made me feel. I did not like the way the Ritalin, the Cylert, or the Adderall made me feel. Kind of zombified. Then I started smoking a lot of pot, doing a lot of psychedelics. I hated drinking. It made me feel sloppy. But I did a lot of psychedelics in high school. And when I was 13 years old, I started playing music. Music became my life. Like, I honestly believe I would be dead right now if I hadn't had the discipline and focus that it took, practicing drums hours a day. But I was also doing risky shit. I sold a lot of psychedelics in high school. I smoked a lot of weed, sold a lot of weed. Just minor stuff. Those were the minor league days for me.
And things escalated?
Yeah, so I was 23 years old, and I went to a bartending academy, and I was doing school during the day to become a bartender, and I had a job at a local club bartending at night. And it was this club that my band would play, and we would pack the place. So when I went in and asked if they were hiring, the owner was like, "Yeah, dude, come on." So I was getting very, very little sleep. And somebody said to me, "Hey, you look like you're dying. You look like zombified. Like, you should try some of this. Hang out with me. We'll do some meth, and you'll be able to do school. You'll be able to, do work." And he was like, "Yo, the college kids are all doing Adderall." So I went with her, and we did some meth. And it was like that first hit. It was like home. It reminded me of all the things that I liked about when I was taking the medication earlier on, but without the zombified feeling. It just felt all gas, no brakes.
How old are you now?
I am 44.
So the drug use led to what kind of other problems?
So,
Always does.
well, it always does, man. When I met that white girl, that's when things started to deteriorate because, you know, I'd done all the minor league crimes and shit like that, but it completely took my inhibitions away. And I had this like desperate need to not come down. You know, meth doesn't have the same type of withdrawal that opioids do, but it has a gravitational pull to it that you need it. You need it. Every molecule of your fucking being needs that next hit of meth. So I had a friend that was one of my dealers who also used to steal cars, and he was making so much money. I just watched him make this ridiculous money. And one night he's like, yo, come with me. I'm going to go steal some cars. And I was like, bet that shit up. I'm down. And, you know, at first it was really honestly just about like, you know, I'm going to go do this with him and, you know, I'll make a little bit of money off of the side and, you know, I'll be able to get some drugs. And then as soon as I got in that car, he hit the lock, opened it up, hit the ignition. I was being the lookout. He waved for me to jump in. I jumped in. As soon as he hit that gas on that car, I felt the adrenaline start to kick in and I was sold. So I started stealing cars a lot, like recklessly and heavily. We had these Russian dudes in Portland that would buy pretty much any car, and you could make a little bit of money to a reasonable amount of money, but they would buy every single one of them, and they were just taking them, putting them on ships and sending them back home. So I would go after this every night. And you know, when you're playing numbers like that, it's just an eventuality. Pretty much anything in crime is an eventuality until you get caught. I ended up getting caught in Eugene, Oregon in a high-speed chase in a stolen car. And they just booked me and released me. And I was like, that's weird. Like, this was a huge high-speed chase. And then they caught me in another one. And I'm like, okay, I'm still waiting for trial on this first one. I'm definitely going to prison now. They released me again. And then on the third one, they actually sent me to prison. I got 39 months for...
Why did they release you?
So the jail in Eugene in Lane County is 1 for 1. One goes in, one goes out.
And they didn't have room for you.
They pick the person who's the least amount of risk to the community. And if you're that person, you get shot out. It may take, you know, a couple hours. You know, that second time, I was in there for like 2 days and I'm like, there's no way I'm going anywhere except prison. They came and knocked on my door and I'd been up for like 7 or 8 days. So I was sleeping and I'm like, yo, get the fuck away from my door, man. Like, what are you doing? And they're like, the custody referee wants to see you. He's trying to release you. I'm like, they're not fucking releasing me. Go away. Don't wake me up again unless there's food, right? And the CO came back like 2 hours later and was like, hey, like, get up. Like, we're literally releasing you. You have to go talk to the custody referee. And I was like, this is real. And yeah, they let me out. Like, but I was aware of how much of a danger to the community that I was doing these high-speed chases. It's scumbag shit. You know, I'm lucky that I didn't take out somebody's kid, you know, somebody's dad, somebody's brother or sister or mom. So I didn't think that I was getting out, but they did. And it allowed them to stack enough time to put me away for a good little bit. So yeah, I got to 39 months. And I went in. Most people that get car theft in the state of Oregon, like, their minimum custody, if you're under like 39 months or under, your minimum custody. So I was expecting to go to like a little, you know, a camp, just some soft little minimum prison. And they ended up shooting me out to Snake River, which is like their gladiator school. And it's like way out in Ontario. It's in the desert. Nobody ever gets visits. It's run by the gangs. You know, the inmate population is run by the gangs out there, and it's really prevalent, really violent. It started off as just a sex offender camp. They put it way out in the middle of nowhere and made it really comfortable and really nice. And then the people with the sexual offenses felt discriminated against, that they were getting put somewhere else where they were safe, because prison is not a safe place for people with sexually based charges in there. And they sued. And then they started integrating other people in there, and they built 2 more compounds. It became this huge, I think it holds like 4,700 people.
And this is where?
Ontario, Oregon, Snake River Correctional Institution.
Oh, wow.
So I landed there, and like this place is kind of infamous in Oregon if you're a criminal. It's like Snake River, that's not where you want to go. And you know, me being my first time, I was like, fuck, I was nervous. And I got there and went out on the yard. First day on the yard, within my first 10 minutes, I saw these 3 dudes, big, you know, burly, tattooed gang members. One of them was bigger than me, and I'm not a small dude. Go up to this little dude, skinny little dude, and they were in his face and calling him all of these homophobic slurs. The kid was gay, like clearly flamboyantly gay, and they thought he was an easy mark. And I guess they had been doing this to him for a while, trying to get him to pay. Kid puts out his left hand, and the big dude goes to shake his hand with his left hand, and the kid pulls the knife out and just starts getting him in his armpit. And there's an artery in your armpit that if you hit it, you'll bleed out really quickly. And that's exactly what happened to this dude. He bled out on the prison yard before they could get him even onto a stretcher to try to take him to medical to try to get the bleeding to stop. So like that was my introduction to prison. But I didn't stay at Snake River for very long. They shot me all over the state. I ended up, while I was at Snake River, in intake, they had labeled me as a gang member. I know that I'm covered in tattoos now and everything. I wasn't nearly as much then, but I had this clover on my hand, and they're like, well, you're one of 2 gangs. And it's either this white supremacist gang or it's this other gang. And I'm like, yeah, it is not any white supremacist stuff. I'm like, I'm not in a gang. Like, they didn't believe me, so they labeled me as a gang member. So they started putting me in with people from this other gang. And it just kind of made sense to me. Like, the politics were kind of the same. We weren't racist. Everybody there was Irish, and it was more of a family. We more watched each other's backs and everything. It was more that type of an organization than it was like one of those white supremacist type of deals. And so I ended up being in with them. And so I ended up getting shot. They don't like it when you're a gang member and you start getting into trouble. A lot of the time they'll shoot you from prison to prison to prison to prison, kind of as a discipline thing. So I ended up landing at Oregon State Penitentiary, which was the first prison built in the state of Oregon. And it's like the old Shawshank type shit. You got the bars in the cell, and it was originally all the cells were made for one person, but they put in bunk beds. So they're sized for one person, but you got 2 dudes in these tiny little cells. And the bars over here, and your bed's right here, the toilet's right here. So when you're sleeping, you have 2 choices. Your face can be by the toilet, which is disgusting. And if your cellie has to get up and piss in the middle of the night, or your face can be by the bars. But, people will reach in. Like, if you've got a beef with somebody, especially if you're a gang member, people will reach in and stab you if you're sleeping that way. So it's like a known thing. You don't sleep with your face next to the bars where you can get fresh air. Because people, if they get you in the neck, bro, it can be all over. So, I did the majority of my time there at Oregon State Penitentiary. And that was enough to teach me my lesson for a little while. I got out in 2010, was doing really good. I got a job for the county in Lane County, Oregon. They let me have a caretaker house in the middle of this park, Armitage Park. Really cool gig, right on the Mackenzie River, and I stayed sober for a little bit. And when I say sober, it's not like I was working a program. I wasn't in recovery, but I wasn't doing meth, which to me at the time, that was my definition of sober. But I was still drinking and everything. And I ended up getting married. And when the divorce hit, I had no sort of fallback or anything in my life that was like support or network. And I started doing meth again. And that just instantly went right back into crime. I made it for a little bit without being a absolute career criminal. I went right back into it. And like I said, it's not an if, it's just a when you're going to get caught. So the eventuality came a lot quicker this time. I got hemmed up on charges for another stolen car. I ended up beating that charge, even though I was dead guilty. But the definition for car theft. In Oregon, they call it UUMV, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. The definition says they have to prove that you moved it beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not getting in the vehicle. It's not starting the vehicle. And they had a witness of me getting in and out of the vehicle and all of that, but they hadn't seen me move it. So I still to this day don't know how I got on the stand, because it was like everybody in the courtroom, you know, my parents were there. I feel so bad for the shit that I've drugged my parents through.
You have siblings?
Yeah, I have a sister.
How is she?
How old is she?
No, is she in trouble with the law and drugs?
So she didn't get in trouble till way later on. And she ended up with the same type of DOC as me.
You guys, it sounds like you had a good childhood.
Yeah, we both did. We had good childhood.
What went wrong?
For me, I know that it was when I got molested. That
You think she went through anything similar?
Not that I'm aware of, but I think that like what happened with her is that she, way later on in life, she got involved with a dude that was doing meth, and he kind of sold her on the idea. And her crimes were much smaller scale type stuff. She ended up slashing dudes' tires, and I think she threw something through the window of his car, something like that. It was very low level. She's did a very short period of time, and she's doing amazing. She's in recovery now. She's doing really, really well. So I also wasn't a very good influence on her. You know, I mean, like I never was trying to give her drugs or wanted her involved in any of that, but she watched me, you know, do all these horrific things and a lot of the time not get in trouble. Like when I beat that case. And then, you know, shortly after that, like beating a case for me wasn't a good thing for me. If I would have gone back to prison, it probably would have chilled me out. I got released and immediately went back to doing crimes. And like that day in the courtroom, before they handed down that sentence, I believe that if they would have given me a polygraph, that I would never do drugs or crime again, that I would have absolutely aced it. But then hearing not guilty, I felt like I was bulletproof. I absolutely felt like I was made of Kevlar, like they couldn't touch me. And that's my ego. That's my pride. That's what always has classically gotten me fucked up. So I got out and started doing the same stuff. And of course I got caught again. And I ended up getting released on pretrial and talked to my attorney. And I asked him, what's the extradition radius on this? And he said, delay, don't do this. And I'm like, no, come on, what's the extradition radius? He said, connecting states. I said, so hypothetically, if I move to fucking Florida, they can't touch me. And he's like, that is correct. And so the morning that I was supposed to go in for trial, because they wanted 10 years on this. They were not coming down off 10 years. The morning I was supposed to walk into trial, I was landing in the Orlando airport. And I've been in Florida ever since. There was a statute of limitations on those crimes, and the statute of limitations has been up for a little bit now. I petitioned a judge, and they dropped the charges, but a lot of that was due to what I'm doing now. Like I've gotten a lot of grace, both from the Florida system, because I got in a lot of big trouble here in Florida, and Oregon because of where I'm at now.
So tell me about your life today.
So today I'm a recovery coach, a peer support recovery specialist. I'm a smart recovery facilitator. I've worked for 4 different treatment centers, and I own my own recovery coaching business. I also have 2 community outreaches, one of which raises money for people in early recovery who can't afford mental health services that they need, because that was me. Like when I got into recovery, I needed the mental health help. It wasn't just a, you know, take the drugs away and you'll be fine. There's a reason I kept going back. And the other one is Narcan distribution, because I've lost so many people to overdose. I actually recently lost one of my kids. He was living here with me while I was sober and doing amazing and in recovery, and he went back to Eugene to become a barber. There's a barber school there that's really good. Eugene's really heavy on education. And he graduated and got an amazing job, and they went out to celebrate, and he had some drinks, and somebody offered him, he had, probably too many drinks. Somebody offered him some cocaine, and it was heavily laced with fentanyl, and he didn't make it. So the Narcan thing is really huge with me.
Yeah. What helped you get clean?
The Secret Service and the SWAT team here in Port St. Lucie. So I lived in Daytona, but I didn't want to go back to stealing cars. There's too much exposure, and I kind of learned my lesson with it. So I started selling a lot of meth in Daytona. But I was watching the people around me get hit. And when they got hit, they were getting these like 15 to 30 year sentences. And I didn't want to do that. I wasn't ready for my retirement plan yet. I always figured throughout my life of being a career criminal that my retirement plan would be get like 15 to 30 in the feds where you can do somewhat easier time. And, that would be my end of days was, in the feds, but I wasn't ready for that yet. So I started doing fraud. I also saw that people that were getting hit with fraud were going to much nicer facilities and getting less time. So I started out with check fraud. We would get people's paychecks. We'd get the numbers off of them. And then we would print up fake checks. We'd use magnetic ink. We'd try to get the number sequences right. And it was really hit or miss. And if it missed, the person you had cashing the check usually had a really rough experience, and then the police would be looking for them. So I started dabbling in credit cards, and I found on the dark web that you can buy all types of credit card numbers. And I like to hit pharmaceutical companies. I've always felt bad about doing crimes that involved individuals, but credit card companies, I didn't have a conscience about. I mean, the pharmaceutical companies, because they're just awful. So we would get the pharmaceutical companies send out representatives that have credit cards that have no location lock because they go all over the country. They're usually Visa Infinite cards that have no cap on what you can spend. And we were living out of hotels because you can't stay in one place for too long. If you're doing fraud, you want to hit one area and hit it really hard and then get out and go somewhere else. And the pharmaceutical company reps are always staying in hotels. So it just made sense. And I had a friend with me who was doing counterfeiting. And so I was dabbling in that a little bit, but I really just liked the production of it more. I wasn't trying to go out and pass off these bills or anything like that. I really enjoyed making them. It was kind of like a highbrow arts and crafts project for me. And we were staying in Port St. Lucie at the Hilton Garden Inn right there on the golf course. And we didn't fit in at all. Like everyone was very, upper class and elderly and retired. And we stuck out like a sore thumb. We were some tweakers. We were fucking meth heads, smoking meth in this place, doing fraud and counterfeiting. So it didn't take very long before one day we went to Chipotle to get food and came back, and I see there's a cop SUV in this side of the parking lot when we're pulling in, and I'm like, bro, we shouldn't stop. And my co-defendant was like, no, it's good. They're not here for us. I'm like, I promise you, we are the only people that they would be here for. And he ended up parking, and as soon as we stepped out, dudes in full SWAT camouflage gear came out of the bushes. The Secret Service and the SWAT team were there, and they rolled up on us. And I had my service animal with me. I had the same service dog for 13 years. And I just threw my hands in the air and said, dude, just don't shoot my dog. They were really cool to my dog. But they put me on the ground and left me on the hot cement for about 3 hours, 4 hours. And I ended up getting bonded out on that. And it was like a $58,000 bond. I went back to Daytona where I lived. I had a friend that let me take the extra room at her house for a few $100 a week. And I had to pay payments on this bond because I had only paid a deposit. So I'm like working my ass off. I knew that I had to stay clean. And I got myself into an outpatient facility that was really good. And I was going, 4 times a week. But then the SWAT team came to my house there and picked me up. They had another set of charges. They had been investigating me in Volusia County for about a year and a half. And it just seemed like every 30 days they were coming for me. The last time I was at work, I was working as a bartender at an axe throwing bar on Seabreeze. And I like to wear my kilt when I work the axe throwing bar. So I'm like standing there with some veterans, teaching them how to competitively throw axes. And one of my coworkers says, "Hey, there's cops at the front door looking for you." And I looked over, it was the SWAT team. I knew exactly who they were. And they had a picture. He's like, "They have a picture of you." So I ran out the back door and I'm running from the SWAT team in my kilt down the tourist district in Daytona. And then I had to go turn myself in because I was already on the bonds, but I didn't want to get taken in on their terms wearing a kilt. I didn't want to go to jail in a kilt, man. It's a bad look. So I ended up turning myself in, and I got really lucky. I got this Judge Foxman, and he's really big on recovery. And he asked me what I'd been doing while I was out on these other bonds. And I told him, I'm going to treatment 4 times a week. I'm working. He's like, "Can you piss clean right now?" He's like, dude, I'll do it right here. I'll piss in the courtroom. Like, I have nothing to hide. And he's like, "Okay, so if I let you out today, I want you to go to this treatment center. It's 6 months. It's, an inpatient thing. You still have to have a job. But it's a really good program. It's where I send people that I want to see get clean. Will you do it?" Absolutely. I want to stay clean more than anything. At this point, I knew that I was done. I had asked God or the universe or whatever entity exists beyond myself to either kill me or cure me. I didn't want to live that life anymore, because when the SWAT team came with the Secret Service, most people, when they have automatic weapons pointed at them, they're like, "Oh shit." There's fear. All I felt was relief. I was like, this is over. I need this to be over now. And going to that treatment center that the judge offered me saved my life. He let me out. He lowered my bond so that I could pay it and let me out. And I went to that treatment center that day. And it really, really saved my life. It was a great program. And I ended up loving recovery so much. It became my passion. And the guys really liked me. The guys that owned the place really liked me. They saw how sincere I was about wanting to change. And that I liked to help other people. So they put me on as an intern, and then I ended up becoming one of the managers, and then moving up the ranks. I became a case manager so that I could one-on-one counsel the guys as I got my certifications. And that original outpatient that I had been going to, I stayed doing that while I was an inpatient. I left every other day. I would leave the inpatient to go down to the outpatient because I really liked the treatment that I was getting there. And I ended up working there and running groups there for about 2.5 years. I loved it. It was a great program. And that's how I got into working in recovery. Because when you see somebody who's just empty, they're desolate. I know what it's like to be desolate. I know what it's like to be completely hollowed the fuck out, to where like you don't know if you should try anymore. You just know that you can't keep doing what you're doing. When you see the light flick on in their eyes, that they don't have to live like that. They get to see their kids for the first time in years. They get a job. They start having self-esteem. They see a different life for themselves. That's fucking amazing to me. So that's kind of where I'm at now, working in recovery. I don't think I'd stay clean if I wasn't working in recovery and helping other people stay clean. I think it's one of those things where you have to kind of give it away to keep it. And my life is super blessed, man. I have a wife that I have no idea why she married me, but I'm really stoked that she did. What she gives me mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I've never had with another partner. It's the healthiest thing that I've ever had. I've made a lot of amends to my community by doing work in my community to try to make things right. And I've patched everything up with my family. And I have the dream that everybody always told me that I could fucking have, but it didn't even register that it could be a reality. but it really is.
Do you see people in your programs that you work that have climbed out of this lifestyle?
Absolutely. Every day.
It does happen, right?
So Daytona is kind of it's a fucking graveyard for me. I sold a lot of dope there. I did a lot of damage. And I know a lot of the people. The majority of them are dead, but we see miracles every single day.
What are the biggest drugs down there?
So, it used to be crack, and, there was some heroin. And then I really heavily introduced meth into that scene. There had been a few people who were running it in from Georgia. I ended up opening up a pipeline and getting it in mass out there. It did a lot of fucking damage. I don't ever want to present this like I'm fucking bragging about it. It's terrible shit to do. But now it's fentanyl, man. It's fentanyl. Fentanyl is killing everyone. It's in everything. So I had a client who, dude's super physically fit, really handsome. Like, all the girls are all over him. He made really, really good money. He sold tree work. He was one of those dudes who goes door to door and, he can sell you anything because he looks like a fucking Ken doll, and he's really smart and very articulate. He had been in and out of the treatment center, whether it was coming there from jail or coming there from the gutter. Every time he left, he would crash and then he'd come back. And this last time, I told him, I was like, man, you know what happens every time you leave? You're not ready to leave yet. I love you. Don't do this. He's like, well, I already signed on an apartment. I'm like, bro, this shit doesn't end well. We've done this dance multiple times. They found him 4 days later. He died that day. And he wasn't an opioids dude. They found a meth pipe in his car. They tested the meth. The meth had so much fentanyl in it that it ended up, he overdosed. And he sat in the Florida summer sun in his car. He had kicked his seat back. His body was so bloated when they found him. It was an absolute nightmare. So, like, fentanyl is an extreme downer. Meth is an extreme upper. They're putting so much fentanyl in some of this shit that it's literally counteracting the upper and driving people to overdose. Same with the cocaine. It's in all of the street drugs. We would test people when they would come in. You do an initial urinalysis and you ask people, so what are you going to pop dirty for today? And people would be like, I'm going to pop dirty for coke. I'm going to pop dirty for meth. I'm going to pop dirty for, Xanax, this or that. Almost all of them, the vast majority of them, pop dirty for fentanyl, regardless of what they think they're fucking taking.
What is the key to somebody actually making a lasting recovery?
So everybody's different. For me, it took absolute surrender. It took me being willing to take everything that I knew, which largely was just my fucking pride, and push it to the side. You have to, if you want to keep your recovery, it's not just something that okay, I'm going to go to treatment for 6 months and I'm going to be cured and everything's going to be okay. It's a daily recovery program. Like, you have to have a program that you work every single day. You have to build your recovery. You have to invest in it. If you want to have a life outside of your substance use disorder, for me, it all comes down to a medical issue, because substance use disorder is a mentally, it's a mentally based disorder. And there's not a pill that you can take. With some mental based disorders, there's a pill that you can take every day that's going to help you. And if you stop taking that pill, you're going to go off the fucking rails. And, sometimes you need adjustments in your treatment, even if you are taking that pill every day. Recovery is the same exact thing. You have to take it every day. You have to pursue it every day. For me, I had to put in the same amount of energy into my recovery that I put into my substances, which is hard because I was a meth head and we can stay up 24 hours a day for a week straight. So I have to put that same zeal and passion and enthusiasm into my recovery. But, even at that, I'm never safe. There's never a day that I'm exempt. These hot summer days, here in Florida, I'll be like yesterday, I was down in the lobby, we were having a steak, and I was like, fuck, this is a good steak. This is a good steak. You know what would go good with this steak? Man, they got microbrews here. And like, I really liked microbrews. I kind of drink like a bitch when I'm drinking beer. I like really good heady beers. My mind starts thinking about it like, yeah, you know, you've been clean for 4 years. A microbrew's not that bad. You know, you could just have one. I've systematically, historically proven repeatedly that I will not have one. I'll have one, then I'm going to have 6, then I'm getting that bottle of JMO's. And then somebody's going to be like, hey man, you're getting sloppy drunk. Like, you want to sniff my key in this bathroom? You want to do some cocaine? And I'm going to take that dude's whole bag. And then I'm going to remember I hate cocaine, and I'm going to go out and seek out an ounce of meth. And it's just a nightmare. It just, for me, I have to stay constantly vigilant.
100% clean.
100% clean.
No drinking.
And now, for me, abstinence, 100% abstinence works. And there's other people that have different programs. I have clients that are 420 sober. You know, they do cannabis recovery, and it works for them. And you know what? They used to put needles in their fucking neck with toilet water and fucking heroin in them, and they don't do that shit anymore. And they just smoke weed, and they're productive. Like, everybody has different goals, and everybody has different needs and ways that they work. For me, 100% abstinence is what works for me. But when I say that, I always say it with a light tongue, because I never want anyone else to feel demeaned in what works for them. We're all completely individual. And that's what I love about recovery coaching. Because if you're in a treatment program, they kind of have to make it cookie cutter. It's really hard to be like, okay, this is okay for this person, but this isn't okay for this person because they have different needs. People in early recovery see that and they're like, that's not fucking fair. How come he gets to do that and I can't? With recovery coaching, it's just that one-on-one. So we get to build somebody's recovery program from the ground up. And like, really, everybody has different root traumas. Everybody has different ways that their disorder has manifest. In my opinion, substance use disorder is the same exact thing as a fucking eating disorder, the same exact thing as a sex addict.
Gambling.
Gambling, absolutely. You know, there's so many different ways that this same mental disorder can manifest. So the treatment can't all be the same, you know, and everybody has different goals too. You know, I have a client whose goals are like just 90% financial. And for him, smoking weed helps him to manage himself enough to be able to do that. And the dude is absolutely killing it. We talk every week about what his goals for the week are, and he's meeting and exceeding his goals every single week. If I were to start smoking, it doesn't do what it did for me back in high school in my early 20s. It just gives me the fear now. I go into straight like anxiety attack. Like I have to be, after prison, I advanced my PTSD so much in prison that I have to be hyper vigilant. So what's going to work for one person isn't going to work for everybody. And that's part of what I think a lot of people in the 12 steps don't understand, is that it's okay if our recoveries look different. What's not okay is us dying in the fucking streets. And the overdoses have gotten to such an overwhelming rate. We really have to use every tool in our tool belt to be able to save people. We have to help people by any means fucking necessary. So that's kind of the approach that I take with hardcore recovery coaching.
That's great. JD, what would you say is the most important lesson you've learned in all of this journey of yours?
The most important lesson that I have learned is that I'm not the most important thing in my life. I lived very selfishly. I did damage to the world thoughtlessly and very calculatedly too. I did things that I knew were going to hurt other people. And then I did things that I didn't even think about. What I've learned is really that what's important in my life for me is the effect that I have on the world and the people around me. And that takes putting myself in the back seat a lot of the time. You know, I don't want to wake up at 4 a.m. to my phone ringing, to answer it, to have the same discussion that I've had with somebody who's in crisis for the 30th time. But it's what I do. It's what I need to do. You know, it's what I'm passionate about. And it takes getting in the trenches and meeting people where they're at, meeting people when they're in fucking crisis. that allows me to have the life that I want to have today. So it takes a lot of me understanding and realizing that I'm not the center of the fucking universe. And I lived like I was the center of the fucking universe for decades. So today I just try to have the best impact on the world around me that I possibly can.
Excellent. JD, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.